There's been a lot of speculation swirling around Mercedes lately, but now things are finally starting to settle, at least when it comes to George Russell. The buzz from the paddock is turning into something much more concrete. Russell is reportedly locking in a 2-year extension with Mercedes. And if this becomes official any day now, it's a huge move. Not just for Russell, but for what it means in the broader chess game of Formula One, especially when we think about Max Verstappen's uncertain future. Now, if you've been keeping an eye on the rumor mill, you know there's been plenty of whispering about Max possibly jumping to Mercedes. We've all seen the stories about Toto Wolff flirting with the idea, those yacht conversations in Sardinia, and all the classic silly season drama. But here's the thing: committing to Russell sends a very different message. It says Mercedes values long-term stability and team culture over a potential shock signing, even if that signing is the reigning world champion. And honestly, it's hard to argue with the logic. George Russell has grown into that perfect Mercedes figure: calm, fast, analytical, and fiercely competitive. Despite the car's ups and downs this season, he's held his own. Sure, Verstappen has shown stronger pace overall, especially as Red Bull has struggled, but Russell's performances have been remarkably consistent. He's clearly earned the team's trust, and extending him gives Mercedes a strong base to build from, especially as Kimi Antonelli continues to develop in the background. So now the big question is, where does this leave Max? Has the door to Mercedes quietly closed? Or is Toto just buying time, keeping all his options open for 2026 and beyond? I'd love to know what you think. Do you believe Mercedes made the right call sticking with Russell? Or did they just miss the opportunity of a lifetime? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious what side you're on. And hey, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and enable the notification bell. Your subscription is super important to us, and it helps us grow on our road to 1,000 subscribers. Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the calendar, because honestly, the situation with some of the most legendary tracks in Formula One is getting a bit shaky. Spa-Francorchamps, for example, I know a lot of fans, myself included, love the history, the layout, and the challenge it brings. But let's be real, in modern F1, it's not always delivering the best racing, and with unpredictable weather constantly putting races at risk, it's easy to see why the conversation about Spa's future keeps coming up. Think about what just happened. Once again, we were this close to not even having a race because of rain. That's not the kind of uncertainty Liberty Media or the teams want to deal with. And when the cars do hit the track, these current machines struggle to produce great battles there. It's a tough pill to swallow, but some in the paddock are wondering, does Spa still have a long-term place in F1? Meanwhile, Istanbul Park is knocking on the door. There's strong interest in bringing it back permanently, not just as a one-off fill-in like during the pandemic seasons. The Turkish Motorsport Federation made it clear they want a multi-year deal, not a rotating calendar slot. And honestly, that track, it's fantastic. The elevation changes, the flowing corners turn 8 alone is iconic. And with growing fan interest in the region, it's not hard to imagine F1 leaning into that opportunity. At the same time, there are talks of Bangkok entering the calendar with a new hybrid street track. Maybe not as classic, but definitely appealing for commercial reasons. All of this signals one thing: F1 is evolving fast, and traditional circuits might have to fight harder to keep their place. So here's the question: if it were up to you, would you keep Spa on the calendar? Even with the weather risks and the racing concerns, drop a quick yes or no in the comments, and while you're there, let me know which track you'd bring back full-time: Istanbul, Sepang, Hockenheim? And hey, if you're enjoying the ride so far, hit the like button and subscribe. We're building this channel with F1 fans like you, and every subscriber brings us closer to our 1,000 goal. Now, let's dive into something that really stirred the paddock recently: the whole setup drama at Spa, especially for the teams that chose to go for wet weather configurations. If you remember, on Saturday during the sprint, The track was dry, so teams were free to tune their cars accordingly. But come Sunday, heavy rain was expected, so several teams gambled by switching to rain setups, changing suspension and aerodynamic elements to maximize grip in the wet. Sounds smart, right? But then came the curveball. The FIA decided not to race in the wet until conditions improved, which meant the race start was delayed and the track stayed too wet to race safely. Because of that, those teams that committed to wet setups found themselves at a disadvantage, forced to run with suboptimal configurations while others who stayed dry were better prepared. The tricky part is that the FIA's rules about park fur and car changes don't really cover situations like this clearly. Technically, once the race is about to start, teams can't make major setup changes. But here's the kicker: the race clock didn't start because the official start was aborted, so some argue that teams should have been allowed to adjust setups once it was clear the start was delayed. The debate gets even messier when you consider drivers starting from the pit lane. Several, including Lewis Hamilton, opted to start at the back with major setup changes and even new power units. Yet, they couldn't switch to a dry setup once it was clear conditions would improve, which arguably hurt their race. Now, I get it, there's a reason park firm exists, to keep the playing field fair and avoid teams constantly tinkering. But when you have a 3-hour delay and a race that technically hasn't started, shouldn't there be some flexibility? Or would that open a Pandora's box of rule bending? I'm curious, do you think the FIA should allow setup changes during delays? Or is the current system fair enough? Vote yes or no in the comments and tell me why. These moments might shape rule tweaks in the near future. And if you like these deep dives into F1 rules and drama, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. We're growing fast and need your support to get to 1,000 subscribers. Ferrari's season has been full of twists, and one of the biggest stories lately has been their ongoing brake pad drama and fuel strategy issues, especially how they've affected both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. You might have noticed that Hamilton has been doing a lot of lift and coast during races, which usually means saving fuel or managing brake temperatures, but this time it was a bit different. Earlier in the year, Ferrari's older rear suspension setup forced them to run brake ducts that led to tires overheating, so lift and coast was necessary just to keep everything in check. But Hamilton's case was mainly about fuel. The team underfueled him, expecting a wet race, which meant less fuel on board than needed. When the race ended up being drier than expected, he was left struggling to hold on, having to conserve fuel by lifting off the throttle frequently, especially behind slower cars like the Williams. That's a tough break for Hamilton because it definitely limited how much he could push forward. It's the kind of strategic gamble that sometimes pays off, sometimes doesn't, and this time, it hurt. Meanwhile, on the technical side, Ferrari introduced new brake pads that behave differently. They offer sharper initial bite, which means the driver has to adjust their brake balance more towards the front of the car. It's a subtle but critical change that caught Hamilton off guard. He locked up the rear tires at the bus stop chicane, something he'd never done before. These brake pad changes might have been better introduced at a less high-pressure moment than a sprint weekend, where practice time is limited. Leclerc had some struggles adapting, and Hamilton only had 1 hour to get used to the new setup before his qualifying spin. It's clear Ferrari is still experimenting to find the perfect balance. Also, there's been some interesting staffing news. Luca Della, with Mercedes experience, is coming to Ferrari to support Hamilton's performance engineering. It seems Hamilton is building his own little support crew at Maranello, almost like bringing a bit of Mercedes culture with him. So what do you think? Is Ferrari turning the corner or still spinning its wheels? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to keep up with all the twists and turns, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support means the world as we push towards 1,000 subscribers. Let's bring this full circle with the heart of the matter: George Russell versus Max Verstappen. The Mercedes decision to stick with Russell instead of chasing Max wasn't just about performance, it's about culture, risk, and long-term vision. Russell fits Mercedes like a glove. He's calm under pressure, aligns with the team's values, and has proven he can consistently deliver. That's gold for any top team. Now, don't get me wrong, Max Verstappen is arguably the best driver on the planet right now. His pace, racecraft, and sheer willpower are unmatched. And you know Mercedes would likely gain some extra wins with him behind the wheel, but it's not always that simple. Max's history shows he can be fiercely competitive, sometimes to the point of causing tension within the team. Mercedes knows that well, having dealt with teammate rivalries before. So the question becomes, would adding Max Verstappen to the lineup really make Mercedes better, or could it shake the team's stability? Meanwhile, Russell has earned trust and fits perfectly alongside teammate Kimi Antonelli, who, despite some recent struggles, is clearly a rising star. There's no denying the appeal of Max's speed and experience, but Mercedes seems to be betting on chemistry and long-term cohesion over quick gains. If Max were suddenly available tomorrow, it would be a tough call, but with Russell locked in, it feels like the door has quietly closed for now. What do you think? Could Russell and Verstappen coexist as teammates? Or would it be a ticking time bomb? Would you prefer a steady, reliable duo or the thrill of Max's firepower? Drop your dream lineup in the comments. I want to hear your take. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more F1 insights, don't forget to subscribe and enable notifications. We're building something special here, and your support is key to reaching 1,000 subscribers.